This is Apple's new MacBook Neo. It comes at an extremely affordable price of $600 or $500 for students and educators, which is a huge move on Apple because in the past, $1,000 was the minimum if you want any MacBook. But this cute little thing here has an iPhone chip, 8 gig of unified memory or RAM, and no active cooling. Is it capable for any music production tasks? Is this a good laptop for budding musicians or musicians on a tight budget? That's what we're going to find out in this video. I'll be testing the Neo with a real mixing and mastering project that I did for a client in both Reaper and Logic Pro 12, and an orchestral scoring Logic project loaded with sample libraries for every single instrument section in a typical orchestra. I'll also test render speed for a large mixing project and how it handles multitasking with other common tasks that musicians might do on a computer, like some light photo and video editing for social media, for example. At the end of the video, I'll share my thoughts on the unique value of the MacBook Neo and some things to keep in mind if you have a tight budget and want to get into music production or media production in general. Now, before I get into the testing, I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed by Neo's build quality because despite costing only $600, it has the same premium feel as the much more expensive Pro models. I think that alone will be a huge selling point for a lot of people. The enclosure is made out of the same aluminum, the display hinge is still one-hand friendly with no floppiness, and the keyboard feels the same too. Right now, I doubt you can find a Windows laptop with the same build quality for $600. Hopefully, that will change now that Windows budget laptop will have some serious competition from Apple. I'll say that I'm not a huge fan of the mechanical trackpad on the Neo compared to the Force Touch trackpads on all other MacBooks. Mine actually has a small issue and I'll be bringing it back to the store, but the mechanical trackpad still gives you the same tactile sensation no matter where you click, which isn't something you get with trackpads on most Windows laptops. Certainly not the $600 ones. If you've seen any of my previous Mac review videos, I typically benchmark the new chip against several chips from the previous generations using DAW projects that I designed specifically to stress test the audio processing capabilities of the chips. While that's useful for understanding the differences between already very powerful chips and the impact of the efficiency cores and a performance cores on different DAWs, a video like that is going to be pretty pointless for the Neo because, well, the A18 chip in Neo is simply not comparable to most of the M series chips in terms of performance. But in case you're curious, here's how the A18 Pro chip fared in my MSIM test, and you can watch any of my previous Mac videos to see how it's set up. You can see that the A18 Pro chip is not even playing in the same league. In my testing, DAWs that don't use the efficiency cores in the M series chips will also not use the efficiency cores in the A18 Pro chip, which is why you see DAWs like Reaper and Cubase outperforming Logic Pro and Ableton Live in the Neo. Being able to use all 6 cores versus just the 2 efficiency cores is just very advantageous, especially for a weaker chip like the A18 Pro. With that in mind, I think it's more useful for me to show you what the MacBook Neo can do in a music production context, given all its hardware limitations, size, portability, and price, because I was pretty surprised just how good the Neo is for $600. So here I have the Reaper project for a song I mixed and mastered a while back for a metal band from Hong Kong. They're called Apolog, and this is one of their singles. It's on Spotify and Apple Music, so you can take a listen if you're into electronic metalcore. The project is in 44.1 kilohertz and has around 100 tracks in total and 143 plugins. So you can see that there's a lot of routing in this library. There's a lot of tracks routing into folder track into more folder tracks. So if you use Logic, this is basically tracks routing into summing tracks. All the drums you see here are triggered live via MIDI with this sample library here. So I loaded a few instances of it. And lastly, on the master bus, This is a project where I mix into a mastering chain. It's a very common technique in metal. It's a little unconventional, so if you feel like that's wrong, well, I don't really care. So there's compressor, there's Saturn, so there's multiple bands going on, linear phase, highest quality here for oversampling. There's also flatline, which is a limiter maximizer. And finally, there's the ozone one. I'm using the IRC4 mode, so it's super CPU heavy. On the guitars, there are also multiple amp sims. As you can see, I'm using archetype Pliny, Gojira, and also Dark Glass. And this is why I test amp sim on multiple tracks. Sometimes I use many of them in a project. It's definitely not the craziest project I had worked on, but it still has a lot of elements and not at all basic or beginner level. Remember, this is an actual project that I did for a client, and I would say maybe 70% of the projects I worked on in the 10 years as a mixing and mastering engineer were similar to this one. I've set the buffer size to 512. It's just what I typically use for mixing and mastering. So let's hit play and see if the MacBook Neo can play it back smoothly. It's a metal track, so there will be some screaming. You've been warned. And when you look at that, it plays back smoothly without breaking a sweat. Looking at the CPU monitor, you can see that the Neo actually still has quite a bit of juice left. I'm going to try navigating around the project. No problem at all. I'm going to zoom in, zoom out. Very responsive. Definitely no hiccups right now. And I'm going to open the mixer. And I'm going to open some plugin windows because it needs some power to display that stuff. So Exciter, and let me do one more. I don't think there's any point to do a fourth one because you literally cannot see. It looks like the maximizer needed quite a bit more power because you can see how like it's now using all the cores more because of this. And if I close that, yeah, it's dipping. Okay, and now if I open Reaper's performance meter, it says here that the CPU usage is around 35%. Disk read is 4.41 megabyte per second. RAM use just under 3 gig. And you can see that there's 142 plugins. So the Neo is handling this project absolutely no problem. Reaper can handle this real mixing and mastering project, which didn't surprise me that much given it can use all 6 cores. And I feel pretty confident to extrapolate that other DAWs that can use efficiency cores like Cubase, Pro Tools, and Studio One will be able to handle this project too based on all the empirical evidence I presented in my previous Mac review videos. But what about DAWs that can only use the 2 performance cores in the A18 chip? Can they handle this project? To test that, I recreated this Reaper project from scratch in Logic Pro 12, so it's completely identical. Plugins, track counts, routing, sample libraries, etc. Everything is exactly the same. And now I'm going to hit play. It looks like Logic can play this project back just fine. I'm going to, once again, try to navigate around the project. Open the mixer. Scrolling is smooth, no problem at all. And let's go to the master bus. I'm going to open some plugin windows. Saturn, no problem at all. And let's do the maximizer. Okay, still no problem. Now, if you look at the CPU monitor, you can see that only the performance cores look to be utilized for the audio processing. By the way, I did set processing threads to 6 and process buffer range to large. I also tested the render speed of this project with both Reaper and Logic Pro on the Neo and on my 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro as well, just so we have a reference point. On the Neo, Reaper took 2 minutes and 50 seconds to render, while Logic took 6 seconds longer. On the M1 Max, it took Reaper about 2 minutes to render the project, and Logic about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This is very interesting because if you look at the CPU monitor, you can see that Logic was only using the 2 performance cores during rendering, while Reaper appeared to be using all 6 cores, but it only finished rendering 6 seconds sooner. Now, let's turn our attention to the 8 gigs of unified memory. This is something people often argue about online. Some argue that 8 gigs is totally fine on an Apple Silicon Mac, but others deem it unacceptably small. I think both sides have sound arguments, but at the end of the day, practically speaking, what can you do with 8 gig in a music production context? In case you're not aware, the RAM basically has one main purpose in a music production context, and that is to load samples from sample libraries you're using in a project. Now, obviously, a professional film composer isn't going to buy a Neo for scoring, but a high school or a college student might want to, I don't know, learn film scoring or dabble in writing orchestral music. I certainly did that years ago. And given that Logic Pro comes with great sample libraries for most of the instruments in an orchestra, I thought I would create an entire orchestra in Logic. This Logic project has most of the instrument sections you would see in a typical orchestra. String sections with 2 violin sections, violas, cello, basses, woodwinds, brass, percussions. There's a library just for timpani, and I even added the harpsichord, even though that's not typically part of an orchestra. We have the whole gang here. I put some MIDI notes on all the tracks, and it plays. Absolutely no issue. If we take a look at the memory pressure graph, it's still green, which means, according to Apple's official documentation, your computer is using all of its RAM efficiently. Logic is really using just over 2 gigs of RAM. You can literally compose a symphony on a Neo without even stressing out the system. So yeah, I would say 8 gig is totally fine. But let's push the RAM further. While I have the film scoring project open, I'm going to open that mixing and mastering project in Reaper that we tested earlier. Remember, the drums for this project are triggered live from a few drum sample libraries in Contact, so more RAM is being used. If we take a look at the memory pressure graph again, we can see that it's now in yellow, meaning, to quote Apple's official documentation, you might eventually need more RAM. So you're still good. And if I press play, yep, it plays back, no problem. Now, with the film scoring Logic project and the mixing and mastering Reaper project open in the background, I'm going to open a 4K video project in Final Cut Pro. This timeline has 4K XLG footage that I filmed on my Sony a7 Mark III. I've got 3 different adjustment clips here, one for color correction, one for converting HLG to Rec 709, and the last one with a LUT as the artistic grade. Skimming through the timeline is completely fine. You can see there's no hiccups there. Completely smooth. I've set the playback quality to better quality, and I'm gonna hit play. Well, first of all, if you are on a previous generation, it plays completely fine, 0 frame drops. By the way, I will say that the background render is off this whole time. So let's put this in the background and let's add photo editing to the mix. I have some photos in RAW format that I took in Halifax, Canada. They are 49 megabytes each from a 6K sensor. I'm going to open one up in Pixelmator, which, by the way, is a fantastic piece of software that runs way better than Photoshop and is also much more user-friendly. Look at how fast that opened. Photoshop could never. So let's zoom, give a zoom, move around the canvas, no problem at all. Look at that. Very buttery smooth, no problem. And if I go in here, make some adjustment, no problem. Yeah, very responsive. I'm now going to bring in another raw file because why not? A little choppy at first, but now not too bad. This is still pretty good. If I zoom in, a little laggy every now and then, but this is absolutely usable. Keep in mind, this is 2 raw files. Turning on and off, no problem. And let's do some adjustment to this photo. See, there's 0 lag when I actually edit the photo. zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. It's very, very impressive. Okay, so it's clear that the Neo is no slouch when it comes to performance, but what I think makes the Neo a much more desirable choice than similarly priced Windows laptops right now, especially for audio, photo, and video tasks, is a combination of its performance and the rest of the laptop and the creative software. Let me explain what I mean. First, the MacBook Neo is extremely portable for the performance it gives you. This thing is light and thin and very, very small. It has no fan inside, so you never have to worry about fan noise. Here's how the Neo compares with a 10-inch iPad, a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and a 16-inch MacBook Pro. If you compare the thickness, the Neo is actually thinner than the iPad with the protective back panel. The MacBook Neo is the most portable MacBook you can get right now. I've been using the 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro as my daily driver for the last 5 years. It's just incredibly heavy and bulky to carry around when you do it frequently. The Neo's small footprint is really something I've come to enjoy. The second advantage that the Neo has is the display. It's very color accurate, and that makes it great for photo editing and video color grading. Here are some shots I took with my A7 Mark III displaying on the Neo and the Apple Studio display, which has remarkable color accuracy right out of the box. As I'm going through the photos, you can see that the colors on Neo's display look almost identical to those on the Apple Studio display, which is incredible. I know that Neo only supports sRGB, but once again, remember that this is a $600 laptop. This display will be awesome for students or anyone with a tight budget to dabble in some photo editing or color grading. Not to mention, it's a 2K Retina display, so everything looks super sharp. The last advantage of the Neo I want to mention today is less about the hardware, but more about the software and the Apple ecosystem. Having a Mac now means that you can get the Apple Creator Studio, which includes all of Apple's professional creative apps. Students and educators can get the Creator Studio for $30 a year, and that comes with Logic Pro, which comes with a huge selection of sound libraries, as I have shown with the film scoring Logic Pro project earlier. To put this into perspective, Cubase 15 Pro, even with educational pricing, costs $521, and it does not come with as many sound libraries as Logic does, as far as I can tell. So if you're a student with an interest in learning film scoring, for example, you can literally get started with $500 on a Neo and $40 on a year of Apple Creator Studio to use Logic Pro and all its orchestral sound libraries. If somewhere along the way you want to create a YouTube channel to post some videos of your work, you already have access to Final Cut Pro via the Creator Studio. And when you need to design this YouTube thumbnail, you've got Pixelmator Pro. I know a lot of people hate subscriptions, but this route is simply much more affordable than the alternatives, in my opinion. Like, if you're out there paying full price for Cubase Pro, you're literally not the target demographics for the Neo, okay? The fact is that for the same amount of money, even if you cannot use Apple's educational pricing, you simply cannot get a laptop that has the same combination of build quality, display quality, performance, and thermal efficiency like the MacBook Neo, plus access to professional apps for audio, photo, and video work with the same amount of content and the same level of user friendliness. If you're wondering whether you should spend extra to get a beefier MacBook, like a MacBook Air, new or refurbished, over the Neo, well, think of it this way. Let's say you have $1,000 to spend. Would you rather spend all of that on a MacBook Air or whatever laptop that has better specs than the Neo and have no extra money to spare for creative tools? Or would you rather spend half of the budget on a Neo and then spend $30 per year to get access to Logic Pro, Final Cut, etc. for your 4 years of university and still have $380 left to buy something that is useful for music production, like some online courses, plugins, sample libraries, a little drum pad maybe. That's it for my review on the MacBook Neo for music production. Hopefully you'll find the information helpful, and I'll see you next time.